What is up, everybody? This is Albert Campa for the CantinaMX podcast, and this is a sort of a special edition of the podcast on a Wednesday night, and we'll be got some special guests with us here. We will have our podcast as normal tomorrow night as well, but this we're touching on a topic just for this evening. We got two guests, and I'll do some introductions right now. For our first guest, Rupinski, and Eugene. He comes from us from the state of mind covering Sun. Welcome, Eugene.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Also, in our second guest is Ivan Pineda of the Eagle Eye podcast. How's it going, Ivan?
Hey, gentlemen, how we doing?
Doing good. And our fellow cantineros, first up, Joel. Joel from California.
¿Qué?
And then finally, Ron. But let me do something real quick for old Ron.
What's going on here?
Ronnie D, what's up?
I think he muted himself.
He muted himself. He was laughing.
No. Thank you guys for that. I appreciate the intro.
Okay, glad to have everyone on. So the topic for today is English coverage. Eugene, Ivan, and Walter and I sort of were tweeting about this, and we decided to it'd be easier to discuss this on a podcast type format. So today, I don't know if you guys recall our discussion, but I think I'm the sole guy with my point of view, and everyone else is sort of has the opposite. But I'll just really quickly give you guys my take. Even though, as John says, I'm a part. I talk about Mexican soccer in English, so I'm sort of a proponent or involved in it to an extent, but sort of am critical or doubtful of its, I guess, use or the need of it. So my point of view is when English coverage is mostly used is for Americans that are somehow interested in Mexican soccer or Mexican league or the Mexican national team, which is very rare. Usually they're not interested in soccer at all, or they're U.S. national team fans. And in the other cases where you have Mexican Americans who grew up in the U.S. and they, after a while, don't speak English or don't speak Spanish, and they want to still cover their home country's team. Or sport in soccer, and they can't, they can't watch Univision, listen to the Spanish broadcast. They'd rather have some type of English coverage. My argument is these when they sort of go to the point of not even liking soccer at the same time, and that's sort of why I put that little Jaula de Oro music there. Because it's sort of like relevant to where the guy asks him, "Do you want to go back to Mexico?" And the kid says, "No, I don't want to go to Mexico." So what do you guys think? Sort of like a cultural issue, and I'll ask Eugene view of the whole, I guess, English coverage, Liga MX, ENG, Ed3, ENG, and all that.
Sure. So I think there's a couple of different issues at play here, and you kind of have to step back and look at each one of them to see the whole picture. I think that your point about fans who are Mexican American and who do not speak Spanish, having that connection through English language social media is a good one. And I think that also can extend into other clubs, other kind of demographics as well. I don't think it's necessarily limited to Mexican Americans. I'm not a Mexican American and enjoy the coverage. I'm also fortunate enough to speak enough Spanish that I can get by without, having to rely on it. A lot of people aren't. They only speak one language, and they would kind of need that. I also think that you're seeing kind of a shift in the overall, I guess, landscape with regards to sports here in America. For pretty much everybody. I mean, soccer is certainly becoming much more popular than it really ever has been in this country. It seems like it's only getting more and more popular, especially with younger kids, and that's not just for Mexican American kids, but that's for kids from all corners of the globe.
So I can copy this on.
So I think that I look at my own son who's 14 and he's into soccer. He's not super into it like I am, but he's aware of it enough where he has that exposure. And for me, he has exposure to Liga MX and he sees that it's fun and I think for him that's kind of normal, and I feel that can be kind of the same for other kids his age. I think they can, if they're exposed to Liga MX, because it is a fun league, they can get into it.
I guess I'll hop in right after that. I think I completely agree with you in this one, Eugene. I think the whole basis of this whole English language movement has actually, I think, been in the works for quite some time now. I think you see kind of the in a sense, a cultural shift. I think you see at this newer generation that's kind of growing up and, growing up here in the States, and you see that there's a tendency to want to interact with what you know, but with the language you're more comfortable using. And that's not to talk down on speaking Spanish or anyone who speaks Spanish at all, by no means necessary. I think it's just you kind of have to look at the picture and where is this sport going in the United States in regards to the Liga MX. And I think you see that there could be, a wave of English language coverage coming in the near future. We already have it now with Fox getting those TV deals for Tijuana, and I mean, you could see that some people already are kind of liking it. There's always those people who kind of maybe are a little bit against it because it's two different ways of viewing soccer. One way is to view it in English, the way in Spanish. Some people argue that in Spanish there's a more intimacy in that sense that there's more passion behind it. There's a lot more drive to it, and in English you kind of see it more as a neutral perspective. There isn't really much of an oomph in that aspect. But I think it's going to be good for the league in a whole if it keeps going down this kind of road where you see more teams taking advantage of the English language market, like Cholos have. Not Cholos, like America, like Santos. Who's the other team? It's slipping out of my mind. Who's the other team that has an English account?
Santos.
Cholos, Santos,
Cholos.
and America.
Oh, Cholos too. Okay, so I was right. Cholos, Santos, and America, and the three, and then you can only imagine what the shift would be like if, for example, Chivas gets an account in English, or you get a Cruz Azul, or you get a Tigres or Monterrey, and it's just gonna kind of pave the road even more to where you can see this kind of just grow into something even bigger, and I would argue to say something better.
If I can kind of
I would agree. Yeah.
If I can kind of jump in here, so Xolos was really the first team to have an English language presence as far as social media goes, and that's born out of necessity. I mean, with the team being right on the border, drawing a lot of its fans from San Diego, from Southern California, that's kind of a necessity. They kind of had to have that if they were going to reach fans on that side of the fence. Santos came in, I think, in 2012 or 2013, and got their English language social media started up and have done a fantastic job. But the real game changer has been America. America came in earlier this year and started their own English language social media. And that's such a huge event America is one of the biggest teams on the continent and in the Western Hemisphere. Whether you like them, whether you're a Chivas fan, you have to admit they're one of the biggest teams on this side of the planet. And for them to have the foresight to say, yeah, we talk to our fans in Spanish like we've always done. We're also going to talk to them now in English because there is a huge portion of the world that doesn't speak Spanish, that speaks English. We're going to go after them. I think that's huge. I think that's so big. And I think, with a big team like that, you're going to start to see other teams to start to pick up on that.
Yeah, my argument is, I agree pretty much with what you guys are saying. My argument, and it's, I don't disagree that these teams should continue to try to cater to the English speaking market, but I just see the numbers coming in as very few. Like, I think very few fans will be interested in the English coverage. Like, take for example on Univision, the Facebook transmissions that Nico and Ramses do are in English. But if you go look at the comments, they're all pretty much discussing stuff. They're all, the live chat's all in Spanish.
Yeah,
and I know it's yeah.
No, I agree with you, Chiquis. I've done that. I hear an echo. So I've done that just to see how many people are talking in English. I've gone to the English feed and on during the live chat, and I'll start typing in English just to see how many people respond, and it's over 95% is just Spanish.
Yeah, and part of that is because Univision is a known entity for Spanish only, and this whole Facebook in English is sort of new. So that's part of the reason. But I think it does show a little bit of, yes, English is needed out there. Like, we can have kids that only speak English, and as they enjoy soccer, they'll look to English coverage of the Mexican league. But I think it's just really the kids are between, and these accounts, I don't see the numbers for these English accounts to equal or even come close to the numbers of followers that are in the Spanish accounts. So I think there is a market out there. It's just not totally huge. The one thing that will convince me, though, is if all of a sudden there's a soccer channel on TV that's just 100% English, covering Mexican league in the U.S., then I'll be okay. This is legit.
That's where I'm going with you.
That's sort of my argument.
And I would have to agree with you on that, Chiquis, because I mean, even like, for example, NBC's Telemundo's Mundos channel that was aimed for the the U.S. Hispanic, it didn't really do too well. And I think they even changed, I think, what is that, NBC Universo or whatever, but stuff like that. But it didn't really get the ratings nor the attention that they had hoped. And when I started seeing Mexican soccer in English, and we're going back into the late '90s, early 2000s. I mean, it was just basically what Luis Bueno, what's his name, Andrea Canales, Joel, myself, Bernardo Fallas, and none of these guys are basically, those guys are like, they're kind of like the ones that were in the very beginning, and most of them are already out of the business.
Right. Ron, if just going off of what you said, if you look for English content from back then, you'll probably find it on a Geocity page.
Yeah, I know. I mean, like when we used to write about it,
and that's the other part, Ron. A lot of that stuff got lost once they updated. People updated servers, or they changed. Because like me and Ron, we started when Goal.com was Soccer Age.
Yeah. Yeah,
and a lot of that soccer age stuff, it just got lost. It's gone with the wind. And
I still have screenshots, though. That's good. I still have screenshots of my articles.
Yeah, and we had articles of like the Sears Copa Pre Libertadores.
When I was a college student at the University of Houston, and I still have like those really crappy pictures
but
that I used to take.
That name though, Copa Sears Pre Libertadores. Sounds made up.
No, but I mean, don't get me wrong. I hope that it does catch on, and I hope that actual jobs are created. But like, for example, I know that, America put the English, feed on it, but I mean, really, I mean, that's like giving the guy in Mexico City's, social media just another duty to do.
Well, I mean,
What pe-
they actually, I actually met the guy who runs the English language account, and I got to speak with him about kind of the idea of what it was, why even start the account. And he said that the team was just was all in it, that it was something that they had in the works for quite some time. They knew that that the fandom was there, that they wanted the English coverage and all that, and they took their time, and they orchestrated it very well. I think this year was probably one of the best years for them to be able to drop this, because I think you gentlemen put it perfectly. Back then, it wasn't even a thing to even think about Mexican League being covered in English. But I think it's just the way that a generation just kind of grows up, and we see more kids being developed here in the United States that have
But
kind of.
you're failing to see one thing. When we were doing it back then, Europe wasn't really in the picture. Now you're bombarded with European soccer, with Champions League, with the English Premier League and stuff like that. So now you got more competition.
You beat me to it, Ron. You, I was just heading there because
Now,
Back-
I mean,
back-
there used to, it used to be where South America, it was the South Americans and the Central Americans who their dream, I'm talking about their children, their dream was to play in Europe. And before, back then, the Mexican children, their dream was to play for America, Chivas, Cruz Azul, Pumas. Now, now, even here in the U.S. and even in Mexico, kids, they're trying to start, their dreams are to start to playing in Europe now. So like, the league has competition now because of all the channels that they have access to, the social media that they have access to. So I mean, I don't until I start seeing actual jobs being created, where you're seeing U.S. Hispanics with filling up those jobs. I kind of have to be with Beto on this, where I'm very, very skeptical.
Well, Ron, let me add to what you said, because when I was going to high school, that was how you started the football conversations. People would ask you Chivas or America.
Yeah.
What team you went for, and I went to high school. Early mid 90s, 95, and I was volunteering. I was at this after school program like 2 years ago, and the kids there, they were talking about soccer, and their thing was, are you Messi or Ronaldo? That's what it is now, man. And if we go back maybe 10 years when we were all like on the forums in big soccer, and we used to make fun of because you would see all these fans that would start adapting European teams.
Yeah. I'm hopeful. I hope that the 2026 World Cup, I'm hopeful that it does change the landscape, and where you have a larger presence, and you have I hope that Telemundo or Univision, they start like you said, a channel where it's full coverage of the Mexican League, but in English. With I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that it does that, but again, I wouldn't hold my breath.
Well, I would look at it this way. You guys have obviously been doing this for a long time, and look at the strides that not only Liga MX has made, but the coverage of Liga MX in both English and Spanish. Look at how different it is now as against what it was, 10 years ago.
But you know what? I'll say that's more to do with social media than
for sure.
Anything else.
The landscape is always and forever changing, and I think that one of the great things about social media is that it's free. It's one of the great equalizers. You don't have to have a whole lot of capital to start up your own TV network. You don't have to have Chivas TV or Chelsea TV or whatever. You can, with a couple of email addresses, start a Twitter account, start a Facebook account, and start engaging fans, and whether that's in English or Spanish or French or Norwegian or whatever, like you can do this, and it costs nothing. You know, I think soccer, the popularity of soccer has kind of exploded. And I think one of the things that I keep kind of thinking about is that, yeah, like Europe, I think is always going to be the gold standard. I think you're always going to have people looking to go to Europe. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with not being Europe. You know, it's okay to be the Western Hemisphere. It's okay to be Mexico. It's okay to be Liga MX or MLS or, you know, Serie A in Brazil or whatever. You know, and I think that if you can kind of define yourself by that, if these leagues can figure out where they are, they don't have to try and be, you know, Europe. They don't have to try and be La Liga. They don't have to try and be the EPL. You know, they don't go up against them in time slots. You know, so I can wake up in the morning here on the East Coast and I can watch, you know, a team in England, and then I can wait a few hours and I can watch a team in Mexico, you know, and then I can wait a couple more hours and watch a team here in the U.S. Like it's not that big of a deal. I think you shouldn't try and pigeonhole fans into saying, okay, well, they're just European fans, they're just English fans, they're just Spanish fans or whatever. I think, you know, you can have multiple teams in this day and age, especially with the accessibility of teams from around the world.
I think you put it perfectly, Eugene. I think it's we can't categorize fans into kind of little sections like, okay, you support English Premier League teams, you support Italian leagues, you only support Liga MX teams. I think Eugene makes it perfectly. You're entitled to being a fan of as many teams as you want to be. I think if we try to pivot each league against each other too, I think that's kind of going to be the downfall of the Liga MX, because you can't compare these two. You can't compare a Premier League against a Liga MX team, only because, and I'm not even talking about play or style. I'm just talking financially speaking. The Prem's going to have more money, which is going to be able to reach out more people than the Liga MX can. I think that's something important too that we kind of have to keep in perspective.
Yeah, you know what? The Liga MX actually did a study. They hired a company. I forgot the name of it, but they hired a company.
Mitofsky? Is it Mitofsky?
One of those, man. But this dude was Luis Miguel Salvador, who used to be the GM at Monterrey, and he was giving an interview, and I think he said too much. He revealed too much stuff. So he was giving an interview on ESPN radio, and he was talking about and this is going back to why they did away with the foreigner restriction rule in Liga MX. Because, and I'm sure you remember, Ron, Liga MX had been, you know, because it used to be Primera División A, and from back then they were talking about just rebranding and how they were looking at the EPL model.
Yeah.
And then one of the names was to call it the Mexican Premier League. But they had, yeah. Now, Ron, I remember you were talking about this from way back then, how they saw how like even they would put like logos in the food and stuff like that.
Yeah. Like they were trying to professionalize everything, like, you know, from the whole fan experience, where even like when you buy a, you know, papas fritas and stuff like that, the wrapper has, you know, all the logo and the merchandising and stuff like that. So I mean, they were trying to. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think at the time it was Club America's president Perez Stoifer, who's the one that went over there to Manchester United. And saw a lot, and he went to a bunch of the clubs in the Premier League, and they were basically, you know, they were just trying to, you know, learn how to brand the league and the clubs and stuff like that. But it never really came to fruition. But
well, I mean, they kind of, some of the stuff like the stadiums and some of the demands that they're making for the clubs now, it comes from that. But the whole rebranding of the league, you could go back to, what was it, Ron, 2005, when they were already thinking of like rebranding the whole league, and just to make it more marketable.
I think what had to do more of that was the whole, you know, fiasco with Colibris, where, you know, they didn't have the funds and the owner was just a joke, you know, and stuff like that, and it ended up where the league had to, you know, assume the expenses.
Was he running a Ponzi scheme? Like
no, the dude, I think his name was Jorge Rodriguez. He tried to. He was an owner of this defunct airline, and he basically was trying to promote his company, and he just didn't have the funds. So
It
not only
sounds
did
like
they,
Club de Cuervos, man.
well, not only did they get relegated, he owed all his players, money. So the federation basically said, okay, look, we're assumed you're basically out of the, he became persona non grata, never allowed to be in football again in Mexico, with the condition that the Mexican Federation actually paid half of the salaries that were owed to the players. So the players never got their full salaries. So after the following season, that's when they came up with I think at the time they had to be liquid, $5 million, liquid. Now we're going back in '93, or I'm talking 2003. Now that number is a lot higher. I mean, it's Liga MX, man. It's starting to become a billionaire boys club.
Yeah, that's where it's headed. So that's why I'm gonna finish with this Luis Miguel Salvador interview. So he was saying how they FMF, that so FMF is all the club presidents of Liga MX. So they hired this company and to just do a whole study of like what they needed to improve, and that was, he said that they needed more international players, and that was one of the big reasons they did away with the whole restriction where it used to be like 4 foreigners, between 4 and 5, depending if you played in Provincia or DF. And they did away with it. You could pretty much line up a whole squad. What is it? 9-11? What is it now? Huh?
The last one
9-9 now? Yeah, but you have no limit now. Like you could have like 30 players registered.
No, yeah. I mean, I guess that's in that study. It makes sense as to why they would want to bring in bigger international players if you want to kind of make your league appear seem more eye catching.
But you know what? Ivan, I don't agree with that though, man. I think that's like trying to compete with the Champions League or an EPL, and I just find that like going the wrong way, because like if you look at like South America, like Argentina, I think that's a good like a better comparison. You could have a really exciting league just being filled with homegrown product. You don't need to bring petardos from
that was my point. A couple of years, we're going back. I think in the early 2000s, there were talks. I recall that they were they were thinking of basically imposing that all foreigners that would come to the league had to be national team players of their respective countries. And I mean, and going to Horley's point, right now when as an Americanista, I see some of the players that the team has, and I'm like, they're not worthy of being part of that team. So it's like when you're filling up the team with 7, 8, 9 foreign players. I mean, a lot of these guys are second rate. And that's not just for America. I mean, that's Cruz Azul, Pachuca. These teams. It's like I still don't see Liga MX as a better product with the amount of foreigners. I mean, yes, in theory, it's supposed to be better, but I don't see it. I really don't see it.
I think you're always going to have times where you have missteps. I think with any league, whether it's Liga MX, whether it's EPL, they're going to do things you just kind of scratch your head and go, why did they do that? I think you're right. I think having 4 international players is probably a little too few. I think having unrestricted rights to sign international players is too many, and somewhere in the middle is going to be a zone where most everybody feels comfortable. You're never going to be able to please everybody, I don't think. But it's a process. It's a process to get there. Sometimes you'll luck out and you'll hit it right on the first shot. Liga MX hasn't done that with the international players, and I think you're always going to have that kind of argument. Should this be a more EPL style league where you can pretty much bring in international players at will, or is it going to be more of a conduit for players to come up, Mexican players to come up and be part of L3? That's a debate for the ages, and I don't think there's any right answer. Finding a good middle ground that's going to satisfy everybody, it's going to take some time. I think the league is doing good things in at least trying the 9-9 and 10-8 rules. We'll see how it goes. We'll see whether teams are still competitive. We'll see if that leads to more Mexicans going abroad, more Mexican players coming up into L3 and thriving. It's a process.
I think I know. I mean, it's too early to tell, but I think the fact that and this goes with the Mexican national team. The fact that the U.S., Honduras, and a lot of the teams in CONCACAF were in transition and were weak throughout the World Cup qualifiers. Once they rebuild, I'm actually worried about the Mexican national team because of the amount of foreigners. Because I don't think that Mexico is going to be producing enough, and Mexico's about to be in a transitional phase, for rebuilding the national team. I mean, I don't see Guardado. I don't see Guardado coming back. Chicharito. There's. I'm worried, and I'm worried about the national team because I'm worried that the amount of foreigners taking away spots, will cause a problem, and unfortunately, the Mexican National League needs the league to produce. It's not like we have Mexican players all over the world.
I mean, but isn't that kind of like like Eugene was saying, kind of like the debate of all debates, in the sense that what do? Do you just field out a whole bunch of Mexicans and hope that that's enough competition within the league?
Yes, I'm gonna say yes, Ivan. Sorry to interrupt you. Finish your thought, but I'm gonna say yes.
I think that the Mexican national team, or I'm sorry, not the league needs to get back into the Sudamericana and the Copa Libertadores.
I agree with you on that. I agree with you with that.
Because I think that's when you started to see players, more Mexican players playing abroad, was after they started playing in the Copa Libertadores and stuff like that. So I don't know. It's just I don't see the 9 whatever, the 10 whatever rule. I don't see that as a good thing in the long term.
I mean, it's because if I'm going back to what I was saying, if we field out a whole just league of just pure Mexicans, and it probably it solves one problem. It solves the fact that Mexico will start producing more talent. But would there be enough competition within that league to kind of really develop these kids?
Wait. I wouldn't say all Mexicans. You could still have 3 to 4 foreigners.
So we're
when you just have 3 to 4, that just means that teams make a bigger effort, that those 3 or 4 they bring are
quality,
really good quality. Because you.
And Hoyle used to get mad at me because I used to call him out on this, and he would get his his feelings hurt. But I used to tell him, I used to tell him that the fact that Chivas plays with all Mexicans. Prior to Salcido and Chicharito, there was 20 years where Chivas didn't really produce a national team player that was really worth their salt. And it's like the fact that you have Cruz Azul, America, Pumas, that play with foreign players and produce better players, especially in the offense. It's I'm all for competition, which, like I said, hey, bring me Aguinaga, bring me Cardoso, bring me those guys, please. I welcome those players any day.
Yeah, Aguinaga's seen as one of his.
So that's I used to, and the Hoyle and I used to get in long arguments about this, but I'm serious. It's like for 25 years, America didn't really produce, or I'm not saying America, Chivas didn't really produce a spectacular player.
Go ahead, Ron. Just to add to that, even then, like if you think about, it was mostly Pumas going like from the 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
And then after that, if you think of like Atlas, that was like in the 90s, around the time of Bielsa, when Bielsa went in there. So yeah, there wasn't much coming in from provincia, man.
No, you don't know from Chivas because, like I said, I'm all for competition. It makes for for better players.
No, but this is my other thing because I'm saying provincia because that's from that area, but you're talking about Mexico City, which is like big, you know.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah.
it's like it should be and it's not, but it should be the London, the Buenos Aires for Mexico, you know. When you think of the amount of clubs and the amount of players that come from that area,
Yeah.
and you just don't really have it. I mean, you just have what, 3 clubs in Mexico City?
You had
It
5.
should be. It should
Now
be.
you have 3.
Yeah.
No, but
Necaxa,
it
Atlante.
should
Yeah.
be like it should be way more, dude. It should be way more. It should be more
It,
than
it
5.
it used to. It used to. I
Yeah,
mean,
Necaxa, Atlante.
and then you also have the Spanish teams, Asturias and España. But shit happens.
Kind of
And
Toros Neza, even though they're on the
Oh
outskirts.
yeah, Nesa York.
Neza York.
That's what they used to call it.
so I've been having some technical difficulties, and sounds like you guys have
Yeah, we
changed the
don't need
subject a
you,
little
Chiquis.
bit.
Yeah, vete, güey. Just make sure this thing is working.
Yeah.
No, but you know what? I want to make.
Good.
I just want to finish my point about like if you, just the more if you have like 3 or 4 and they're quality foreigners, the more local talent you have, the greater odds of a lot of those players are gonna end up being really good. Because I mean, think of like Uruguay. Look at the Uruguay league. They're not known for having any good. You know, if you go to Uruguay league, they're not gonna have some of the better foreign players.
No, they don't have the money, dude. With 3 million
It's all local
people,
talent.
with 3 million, population, there's only so much, finance money that each team could generate.
And it's funny
So
that you
Dude, they don't even have even their training, facilities. And you've seen interviews with Uruguayos that go to Liga MX, and
yeah.
they say, what was that Uruguayo from Pumas? And he was like, he was his
Alcoba,
first.
unfortunately, he made the news this week.
The same. Is that the same guy?
Same guy that got into a round of fisticuffs with
No,
Siboldi.
See, I was telling Eugene there was something more there, man. But wait, don't let me get distracted.
Well, it's funny because in our private chats, I'll tell you, in our private chats, it's like, I was thinking he either called a player a racial slur or he made a pass at a player's wife. Because normally, that's what I was thinking. I'm like, because normally when a player and a coach fight, it's not the player or the coach that leaves, But
it's not over stuff like that either, man. Because South America's harsher, dude.
Yeah,
it's harsher. The things that they'll tell you, man, like que concha tu hermana and stuff like that. But Ron, don't distract me, wait.
Sorry.
No, remember that interview he gave with Pumas, and he was saying how when he was in Uruguay and he had like his shoes, he had like the same cleats for so many years. He had to like tape them up to keep them from falling apart. And he said, I get to Pumas and I see this like I see the juveniles and they're wearing brand new gear, like top to bottom.
Yeah,
they got all these trainers, they got all this new stuff, and I'm thinking like, I was like, and I even go back to like a few years back. There was this Toluca used to have this partnership with some Uruguayo team. They used to send their youth, and they did an interview with the youth, and they said like they didn't even have hot water in the, for where after they finished training, they didn't have hot water.
Well, I think that's one of the big differences between Uruguay and Mexico, and Uruguay doesn't have the economy around soccer like Mexico does.
No.
Uruguay is probably always going to be a league that develops young talent and sells it on in order to survive.
Yeah, by
simply
necessity.
because- yeah, I mean, they have to. They have no other option. There's no team there that can pay 10 million for a player.
Yeah,
Um,
but
I think,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think Mexico's situation is different. I think Mexico, and they're trying to figure out what they are. Are they a league that sells on players, or are they a league that buys players from these
But
other
Mexico's
leagues?
never been an exporters league. They've always brought in players.
Yeah, but most of the conversations that we have revolves around, oh, well, who's going to be the next Mexican player that goes to Europe? Who's going to be the next Europeo?
But you're right about
But that's
that.
recent.
You're wholly, that Mexico's always been, that they always buy. But the problem is that the press at times they criticize, when they spend when they spend, for foreigners as opposed to investing in canteranos. So it's like,
Press has to have something to write about.
But Ron, that's my point. You don't have to invest that much in canteranos. You see Uruguay, dude. They don't even. They don't even have hot water, dude. They don't even give them shoes, dude. All you gotta give them is playing time. That's all you need, playing time. Just throw them in there, as much playing time as they can get, and you're ultimately gonna get more play. That's just numbers game, dude. The more players you have playing, the better odds you have of unearthing some gem.
It's not so much though. The thing about there's two things that really make Uruguay a very good country that produces soccer players, and one is it's got the culture, the sporting culture. I mean, you said it yourself in Montevideo. There's like 14, 15 professional clubs, between the first and second division or whatever. But also they have a coach to footballer ratio. It's relatively low. So I mean, these coaches are really able to work with the players that they have. And unfortunately, Mexico with this population and stuff like that, sometimes the players are getting the proper coaching for a number of reasons. But that's one thing that actually serves to Uruguay's advantage.
But I think now
that brings up another point on this on this Mexican or English coverage is if the United States had the soccer culture or the like you said of Uruguay, and then it would be a huge market for English language because all these guys, even the Americans, would be loving any type of soccer. Mexican soccer would be right. It's a neighbor.
But
so
the U.S. too big though, Chiquis. It's just too big, and it's too big a country. It's gonna take a bit longer.
I mean, I think the soccer culture in the country is headed in that direction. I think, like Joel said, it's gonna take a little bit more time for it to reach kind of every corner. But I think ultimately, if I'm going back to what we were just discussing, I think you kind of fall into what is it that you want this league to be? Does the Mexican league want to continue to be that league that brings in players, that buys players, that wants to produce a much higher talented league, or is it going to be an exporting league? Because it sounds like that's what a lot of people want it to be too. Because like you said, who's going to be our next Chicharito? Who's going to be our next Ochoa? Who's going to be that next Chucky Lozano to kind of make it into the European? That's kind of been our shift now in regards to our players.
But you know what?
Want it to be an exporting league instead of this kind of high profile league that maybe we all want it to be.
Well, I'm gonna tell you something, Ivan. There's a big, one of the big things for making money in CantinaMX is in buying and selling players. So they buy players from South America really cheap, and then they sell them. And I'm telling you, if you go way back, late 90s, early 2000s, there was a big problem just because you had cartels, even FARC, using player transfers to wash money. And it's still there's still a lot of scams with that. You could see how many foreigners come in, and then they don't even get playing time. They just buy them just because they know they're gonna make a profit sooner or later, and they paid X amount of money, and which hurts Mexican youth because then it cuts the number of players you could have in the first team.
Yeah, I can see that, and what you just said kind of reminded me what I was going with earlier too was you said that the league would benefit from having about 4 to 5 talented, very good foreigners to come into the league.
Yeah.
Now my question is though, how many teams can actually afford to buy 4 to 5 good foreign players in the league?
Well, you know what? A lot of times that just means you're gonna have to be better at scouting. So, for example, Necaxa beat AC Milan to Alex Aguinaga.
You know, like
Yeah,
I remember Toluca when they had Lebrija. I mean, their
yeah,
scouts their scouts were spot on, dude.
yeah. Dude, they brought Cardoso.
Cardoso, Vicente Sanchez. I mean, it seemed like every foreign player that Toluca was bringing in, it's like, dude, they were producing.
And Ron, also Tecos.
Tecos and even Atlante.
The Tecos scouts used to be, they brought Sebastián Abreu.
Yeah.
That guy that was a national team player caliber. Uruguay national team player. And they brought him in.
But now you have to think about them today, not about what the teams had
done.
Well,
today it doesn't matter because they took away the restriction, so now you have a limit, and
Yeah, but if we're gonna implement this new for example, let's say they all of a sudden do kind of a 180 and say, okay, you can only have now you can only field 4 foreigners on the field, and now teams are kind of stuck on, okay, now we got to bring in these really good foreign players if we want to compete. But do we have, one, the money for it, and two, do we have, for, like you said, the scouts for it?
Oh, the money's there, dude. South America's broke.
Yeah, the money's there.
It's super broke, dude. Dude, Argentina is Argentina, Uruguay, Chile. Those, dude. You're going to Costco and you're bargain shopping.
But I'm saying, like, it sounded like if you wanted these 4 or 5 good foreign national team caliber players, it would sound like you're trying to pick them even out of Europe.
That's not going to happen, though. Like all these players you guys are talking about, like Abreu and all these guys. Yes, they were national team calibers, but they weren't national team stars for their South American countries.
And I think that's what we want.
Wait, what are you talking about? Cardoso was a star, man.
Cardoso, Aguinaga, they were.
Dude, Aguinaga, he's got them icon, dude.
I know.
What the?
Even now you see Gaitan, not Gaitan. Well, Chelito Delgado, Gaitan, even those guys, they were fringe players. Okay, there are exceptions, like you guys are saying, but even Gignac, I mean, he didn't even make the French. I mean, that's sort of a hard ask, but.
But he did make the Euros, roster.
He was what, half an inch? Ron, was he half an inch from hitting the sweet spot?
Yeah.
He scores that goal, dude, in the final. Forget about it, man.
So
this is John's thing, man. He's not here. He would tell you though. Yeah. If Gignac scores that game-winning clutch goal for France in the Euro, dude, Liga MX would have just been national news for a long time.
So what's the connection?
But hold on, Chiquis. But going to what Ivan was, what the Liga needs to decide whether we're going to be an importers league or an exporters league and stuff like that, or invest in canteranos.
They decided, Ron. They decided to be importers, dude. That's the whole foreigner rule.
And you know what? And I go back and I think, I think of the 93, 94 Ajax team. I think of the Barcelona team with, Frank Rijkaard. And I think of the Boca Juniors, so, with, Bianchi, where most of the players, the key players were came up through their ranks in your academies with using, 2, 3, 4, top foreign talent. And I've always thought that that's the best, the best system to use.
Is it the best system for the long term, or is it the best system for when it comes out?
I think that that's when you produce. I think that's when you produce a team, a backbone. Where there's the core players, like the core group, and then you just you get 2, 3, 4 players. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Ajax only had like one or two players that were not part of their academy. Everybody else, what came in from that Ajax academy, and obviously with also with Barcelona, most of their players, with the exception of like Messi and Ronaldinho and Deco and stuff like that, but most of those players were from the Barcelona, from their academy, and that even holds true for America during their golden years. When you had Luna, Tena, Cristobal Ortega, and all those type of guys. All those guys came in, and they just had just 2 or 3 good foreign players.
Yeah.
So I mean, and that also holds true for Cruz Azul when they were like in their golden in their prime. So for me, I don't see this 5, 9, 10 players, and I understand why they're doing it, because it unfortunately, I'll try to look for the magazine. Football Total had a list of all the players that the Mexican teams owned, and most of them, they were just being traded to other teams, other leagues, and stuff like that, because like Holy said, it's a moneymaker.
Well, Ron, didn't at one point America have 30 foreigners in their payroll?
Yeah.
30, man.
And I'm sad to say
That's 3 teams.
as an Americanista, that's sad, but unfortunately, like you said, it's a business,
There's that 3 or 4 teams worth of extranjeros, man.
Yeah.
Hey, so how does this connect to the whole English coverage? Because I think we sort of strayed off.
A little bit.
I mean, so the importers, exporters. I mean, that's sort of like another issue.
But I mean, I think it does find a way to tie down into that, because I think if we become this import league, then we can then we can kind of reach more of an audience, in a sense, if we were just kind of like an export league. I don't know if I'm ever make any sense saying that.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, but Liga MX has always been an importers league. I mean, that's been their business model since the 70s. I mean, that's just.
Oh, John's here.
Welcome, John.
It's just yeah.
El amigo John.
Sorry, I've been in a hospital.
Where's John's
intro
music?
It's always been an import.
And John, we need some intro music for John.
But I think John put it perfectly. It's been the basis of the league, but I think now you see it kind of. They're trying to step it up. They're trying to be kind of the Premier League of this side of the world.
The thing
but
that
then
I
they
think
got to
of,
start signing players to do that, and then I mean, outside of Gignac, who in the past 3 or 4 years has any club signed
Jonathan
a player
Gonzalez.
of that kind of pedigree?
Jonathan Gonzalez. See, that's my point of like going to the English coverage. You're not going to import any.
The big problem that Liga MX is going to run into over the next 3 or 4 years is.
No, I agree, and I'm not going to argue with the fact that
power change.
Yeah, we don't have that kind of money to compete to bring a.
Oh, they have the money. Don't think that they don't have the money. They have the money.
Yeah, but they're not going to splash 60 million for a Willian or for a Coutinho, or they're not going to bring in a Pogba. That's what
I understand that, but what they can bring in is and then they bring the super duper superstars, but there's of mid level. I mean, Gignac at the time was, at best a mid level guy. So I mean, if those are the players, I mean, don't get guys that are past their prime. Get guys that are on the other side of 25 that still have 4 or 5 years to give. That have had a decent career, and you don't have to shell out the 60, 70 million. You can shell out 10 or 15. That'll be fine. But again,
one of the things that playing in the Libertadores and Sudamericana did is. You actually, the scouts actually had a chance to see a lot of the South American players, when Mexican teams would face them. Like, for example, when in 2000, when America faced America de Cali in the Copa Libertadores, Frankie Oviedo was part of that team, and he's really, he's like, wow, I was like, man, that guy's a really good player. And then
That
next thing you
time
know,
I forgot about Frankie Oviedo.
yeah, so like the
Tall,
following,
lanky bastard.
yeah, that guy he could juke, man. Jesus, I remember him. Anyhow, so it's like, and the same thing, when you would see these players, that Mexican teams would face, and then like the next season you would see, that player from from Vélez Sarsfield, or you would see that player from whatever. And it's like, that's how I think the Mexican League should go back to doing it, and that's how they were scouting these players, because they were they were facing them, and stuff like that. I don't think that you really need to make try to find the next Guignac in France, or find the next dude from Belgium.
It's interesting how you say like the scouting, because that's how Marquez got scouted for Monaco, because the scouts were actually, it was during a Copa America, they were actually scouting the Chileno.
Yeah.
And the scouts saw Marquez and they were like, we need this guy, so they ended up hiring both.
Yeah.
So, you're right, Ron. I mean, that's how Dario Verón ended up at Pumas.
Yeah.
They played whatever, I forget what club he was with in Paraguay, and they played him in the Libertadores and said, you know what, we need to bring this guy on. And outside of Cabinho, I can't think of another foreigner who had more of an impact on the team.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to find anybody who would disagree that playing in the Libertadores should really be the ultimate goal of Liga MX. It's to get clubs back in that tournament for a myriad of reasons, for exposure, for scouting purposes, for just proving yourself against some of the big boys on the block. I think though, limiting it to only 4 or 5 foreign players is kind of going a step in the wrong direction, and I don't know where, for me, the perfect spot lies. I don't know if it's 7, 6, or if it's 8. I think 4 or 5 might be a little bit too few. I think bring up clubs that bring in these guys and they sell them on. Not every player is going to make it. Every player they bring in is going to be a surefire hit. You can have the best scouts in the world, scout a guy, think he's going to come in and just kill it, and the guy can't stand living in Mexico, or he can't stand the team, or he hates his coach, or whatever. Things fall through all the time, and it's not necessarily a failure of scouting or a failure of the player. And I think if you have only 4 slots for that, you're really kind of putting all of your eggs in one basket.
No, I understand exactly where you're coming from, because I've said it, time and time again. When you play with a team, with America and stuff like that, some players just do not adjust. I mean, Darwin Quintero, prime example. He just didn't like living in Mexico City. So I mean, I understand exactly what you're saying, but I just obviously, I've followed the league for a long time. That I personally think, the rule that they had before, where they had 5 foreign players, or 5 foreign players playing in Provincia and 4 in Mexico City. I thought the quality, of the league, especially the foreign players, personally, I think it was a lot better then than it is now. Now granted, also, the leagues had that, the long season, which also contributes to a team, molding and getting to know each other better over a longer season. I mean, I understand
you have to pick and choose the guys. I mean, if you're, one of the reasons why Mexicans have such a hard time breaking through in Europe, if you don't have that Euro passport, it's going to be very hard for a Mexican player to take one of the, the quote unquote 3 foreigner spots, unless they're, they're an absolute crackerjack. And so, I mean, I'm sure that back then, I think of, I think of Pumas in the late 70s, early 80s. I mean, the foreign players they had on their team were, they were terrific. And then you can say the same thing about Cruz Azul, the same thing about America. The foreign players that they had on those teams were outstanding, and they had to be, because they had to make those right decisions, and you can't waste the spot.
John, not just not just the players, but to land in Horacio Cesarini, who was legendary in Argentina and Italy. That's just huge. I think a lot of the young fans don't realize just how big of a name that guy was, and to end up in Pumas was just like it's kind of mind-boggling.
I know we're kind of straying away from the topic of English language
That's
and coverage of
that's
other...
typical of Cantina, Eugene. That's where we request a couple drinks.
But
I'm gonna try to bring it back though with what you just said right now, Joel. With in regards to what you just said right now, that some of the youngsters that follow the league maybe don't realize some of the big movements beforehand. But I think
Yeah.
we're straying away from talking about what was instead of kind of focusing on what is and what it is right now to talk about the present and the future instead of kind of trying to dwell with what was in the past. I think right now we're in a situation where the league itself is very entertaining. It's very competitive. If you want to pit, if you want to pit them alongside with what happened in the 80s, in the 70s, and the 90s, then we can do that. But they're not going to focus on that. These fans, these people that kind of want this coverage in English.
But Ivan,
now
when did Mexico reach that quinto partido?
It's just we haven't been to that stage yet, but I don't even think that's even a situation at this point to even talk about coverage in language and the demand for it. I think if you notice, it's always. I feel like now we're at a stage where people welcome it, people want it, and these younger kids, these 13 to 16-year-olds who are on Twitter, who are on Instagram, who are on Facebook, and constantly kind of see this, kind of being thrown at their face. They're much rather gravitate towards the English than the Spanish in a sense, because it's kind of who they are, and then that's how
they are. But when they do, it's gonna be Euro based. It's gonna be Real Madrid, Barcelona, whoever the Neymar, Messi, Ronaldo.
But that kind of falls on kind of what we're us as a community, which we are kind of pushing for that English language. The more of us there are, the more content we can throw out there, the more they're gonna kind of gravitate towards that. Yeah, they're gonna see Neymar.
I'm gonna tell you something about content, Ivan. Scan out the window, man. You could write 1,200 super research paper, and it's not even gonna get as much traction as a less than 150 character tweet.
No, I get that. I get the league is not in a position to out battle a Neymar post or a Ronaldo post or a Messi post, but it is in a very strong position to kind of maybe take over a couple of different different slots. For example, if you post out something about America or something about Chivas, something about kind of the big team in Mexico, maybe some people will gravitate towards that more than maybe something that's going on in the Spanish league that doesn't involve Real Madrid or Barcelona.
Here's a point I have on this subject. So the problem with the English coverage is that the English coverage is in a country that's not a soccer country, in my opinion. I don't know, it might be growing. It might be growing and going that way in small spurts, but I think as a whole, the United States is an NFL country, an NBA country, and not really a soccer country. It's more of like soccer is for kids. Soccer is to keep them safe and they won't get hurt and playing football and stuff. But when the kids grow older, they sort of stray off and they're playing basketball on the courts or they're throwing the football around. So I think
look at it this way though. The United States has 370 some million people, and yes, it's primarily an NFL country, primarily an NBA country, but kids that like the NFL, kids like the NBA or the NHL or whatever, they can also like soccer. They can also like EPL and Liga MX and MLS and Serie A. They can follow Ronaldo and then come home after later in the afternoon and watch a Liga MX game. I think kind of trying to pigeonhole the U.S. as a soccer country, or you can only be an Liga MX fan, you can't be an EPL fan or an NBA fan or something like that is very dangerous. I think because then you start to lose sight of just how many people are out there that could potentially get turned on to it. Liga MX has a fantastic product. It has a fantastically entertaining product. It's not going to be necessarily the quality of the top tier Euro leagues, but it doesn't have to be. It's entertaining. It is fun to watch. I think if Liga MX and the clubs and people like us who cover the league in English can show people, hey man, this league's fun. All right, tune in. You're gonna see some wild ass shit. Okay, people will do that. People will get hooked, and I think that serves the league well. I think it serves us well as writers and bloggers and podcasters. That we can have this sort of discussion and be kind of optimistic for a future like that.
Well, you guys are absolutely right, but here's the issue. The biggest and you guys are all right, and yes, and I think I've been a part of this community now for the better part of the last 15 years or so, and I have seen it grow, and I think it's great. But the only reason that it's grown is because of stuff that we've done. I mean, we don't get any help from Liga MX. Liga MX, as far as they're concerned, probably don't even know that we exist, and that's on Liga MX. I mean, in 2018 to fanfare that Club America finally has an English language Twitter, or whatever it is. Me, that is beyond insane. He's does such a poor job of marketing itself.
But even their websites are shitty.
Oh, they're terrible.
Even if they did do a good job, even if they did do a good job of marketing and had English channels and Twitter feeds and all that stuff, this is the problem. Like, here's an example. Like, say you have a Mexican first generation family that comes to the United States. They have kids. We all know, if you talk to Mexican Americans that grew up, how hard it is, for them to maybe the first generation knows Spanish, the second generation not as much, and the third generation, nothing. And I think that is the problem there, because as the generations come, they Americanize. They don't speak the language. They lose the culture, and they lose the even passion for soccer in the first place.
That's exactly true. They're more likely to go see other sports.
Yeah, exactly, and just something to prove it, though.
Generalization. You can't say that's going to happen every time.
No, but even like I
just don't buy that.
Well, you see examples of it all the time, though. Like, say, for example, like Walter and I were talking about an NPR Latino segment where they interviewed.
Yeah, but just because you're a fan of one sport doesn't mean you can't be a fan of another. I mean that.
I know. I'm not saying that. I'm saying
that's exactly. I'm saying
the majority. No, I'm saying that the majority of Mexican Americans, as the generations pass, they lose. It's hard to teach your kids Spanish. It's hard to inculcate them. And you can preach to them, like Eugene was saying. You can preach to them saying, yes, Mexican league is awesome, soccer is awesome, and you could, and they might do that. It's so difficult. Chiquis, you're gonna have to hound them every day.
Chiquis, I'm not to what you're saying. I'm in South LA. I grew up in an extremely, immigrant community, and the majority of my friends, they were Raider and Dodger fans, Laker, before football.
And that's in LA.
That was straight LA, and I'm going way back to when the Coliseum was Azteca del Norte. Mexican national team, any soccer team, they played 80% of the games in LA.
And that's a great example, because in LA.
How many Liga MX games were on TV?
Yes, John.
Like one or two on Univision.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
And then when Telemundo came, they had a tape. Like a tape delay, like an old game, like Match of the Week.
They play the.
That's how I got into Liga MX now. That's how I got into Liga MX. No, I grew up in Florida.
Jorge Ramos.
I grew up in Florida, so we had Univision, we had Telemundo.
Oh.
And I would see these games, and this was, right around the time of the '94 World Cup, and there was no soccer in the U.S. Yeah. And I saw these games. I'm like, oh my God, there's soccer, and it's free on my television.
It was the only game on TV, and it was once a week. Yeah, it was the only game on TV, and it was once a week.
Good time.
Broadcast. I mean, remember that it wasn't, at least on the English side, it wasn't until 1993 that they would actually show a game without commercials. Prior to 1993, if it was on English language, they would cut away. Hey, we're going to take a break. We'll be back in however long.
I used to have to risk my life and go to Rita's pool house in Houston to watch the Copa Libertadores, man, because every time
it's on closed circuit.
Like it was the Mexicans versus the Central Americans and the South Americans, dude, and I feared for my life in that bar.
Did you talk with an accent, Ron?
But then,
did you say Ross?
But then around 2003, 2004, that's when Fox Sports World says, hey, they picked up the Interliga and the Copa Libertadores.
No, so wait, weren't they like 95? I think 95.
No.
When it was Fox Sports America, and it was pretty much Fox Sports Argentina, because all the coverage was from TYC.
No, Libertadores was actually started 20 years ago, in 1998. So that's 20 years ago, Libertadores.
Yeah. There was only one game on. It was Sunday at noon. And back then, I think America played at noon. I think Atlante even played at noon occasionally.
Yes.
And that was the only game we got.
But hey, in 97, that's when Galavisión started. And that's when you were able to watch. And that's when you were able to watch more.
Chavo del Ocho and soccer.
And Cándido or Dr. Cándido.
Cándido. Cesarín, papá soltero.
Basically my point is as like this generation right now has kids or is raising their kids, it's tough to raise them and have them learn their country's language, like Spanish. And their generation, for their kids, it's going to be even tougher. So down the road, I think the same with language is the same with the passion for soccer. As they grow in the States and they adapt to the culture here, they're going to lose that passion.
Really quick, gents. I work.
Coverage?
What's that?
Wouldn't that be more important for us to have this English language coverage for those kids who are going to start, speaking more English than they do Spanish?
Exactly.
If we're going with a generalization.
But that's what I'm saying is that they're going to, as they lose the language, they're going to lose the passion for soccer.
You know what, Bruce? Just really quick, sorry to cut you, Chiquis. I work. That's my main job. I mean, I've been doing soccer journalism and covering for newspapers and websites since 2003. But my main job is I work with youth shelter, and a lot of the Mexicans I see, they're not into soccer, man. They follow whatever is the social trend. So it's most likely basketball or football. They just kind of lose it. They kind of lose the whole soccer. It's more like the younger generation or the newer immigrants that come in that are still more into the football than if you're first or second generation, you're more likely to not follow it.
Well, I don't know, because look, I grew up in the Inland Empire. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're aware where that is, right, Joel?
Yes.
Okay, so in the Inland Empire, and in high school, everywhere I went, everywhere I talked to someone, it was always soccer. Yeah, we would talk European, but we would also talk a lot about Mexican soccer. I would wear my America jersey. People would tell me stuff about it, good or bad.
But they whistle like...
Yeah. But it and you know what? And it's part of it. It's part of it. But it kind of shows that these kids, in the Inland Empire, where you would imagine not a lot of them would have that interest in regards to a place like LA. It was mostly soccer culture.
I also think this is a generational thing too. Joelle, you and I are about the same age. Ivan, I think you're probably about 10, at least maybe 10 to 20 years younger than we are. Which is kind of awesome for you. And I think, you're seeing a lot of...
Thank you for making me feel old, Eugene.
Hey, you and me both, man. But, I think what you're seeing is a big shift in, where soccer is now. When Ivan, when you were going to school, not too long ago, as opposed to, when I was in school 20 years ago, not too many people talked soccer. When we did, it was around, England. That's because it's all we knew. A couple of the kids would watch Liga MX. I didn't really know enough about it feel confident talking to them about it. But look at where we are now. You can literally follow any league in the world if you have social media account. You
That's
can
true.
find a team in Nigeria and follow them, and it doesn't matter. That you can never watch a game or whatever. Liga MX has huge advantages, and with an English language, you can help these kids connect with their parents, their grandparents. My abuela is a big Chivas fan, and I can't talk to him about it because he doesn't speak too much English, and I don't speak too much Spanish, and Chivas only tweets out stuff in Spanish, and it's very hard for me to follow. They had that. There would be a bridge that people could use to connect themselves with their team, with their family, with other fans. I mean, hell, that's how I found a lot of the other people that watch Liga MX is through social media.
And I agree with that. I think you're totally correct. And there's many examples of what you're talking about. And what Ivan was saying, like in LA, I think Joel's experience is pretty rare. I think LA, out of the whole United States, is a country where generation and generation can grow, and still Mexican Americans would still love soccer. They would still keep that culture. That's just one part of the country. There's a whole other part of the country.
LA is a huge soccer area too.
Yeah, exactly.
LA, Texas, and to some extent Florida, and here in the Northeast, I'm right outside of Philly, and Philly, New Jersey, a lot of soccer goes on here, but I think these are very good communities that have a lot of people that could be turned on to Liga MX, whether they speak Spanish or not, and I think one bridge that can be used is English language coverage, whether that be through a team having an official account, whether it be through people like us doing our thing. But I think that one of the things that a team having an official account does is to make it more official. The team is actually saying, "Hey, look, we see you. We see you, people, who want to like us or who do like us and don't speak Spanish. We see
Now,
you. We're with you."
I have a question for you guys, because I think this is a detail that's being overlooked in terms of English. Do you see Telemundo or do you see Univision renegotiating with Azteca or Televisa? Because once Televisa or TV Azteca, once they get that whiff, that itch of renegotiating, because they have a larger audience, and it's going to be an American audience or an English speaking audience. Do you think they're going to be willing to pay and fork up and pony up the dough?
I think Univision has the power to at this point to kind of just get their own cameras down there and kind of just make their own feed.
It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way.
But Televisa has stock in Univision.
Univision has no power in Mexico, and Telemundo has no power in Mexico. Whoever controls that, it's basically the federation, which is Ron, Televisa and TV Azteca.
Yeah, but Ron. Yeah. Televisa owns stock in Univision, and TV Azteca does have Azteca America.
Exactly, but they're not full. But they're not majority owners.
Television. No, they're not. They're not.
And keep in mind that they went to court, a couple years back. Televisa actually sued Univision. And it was because of the it had to do with rights to novelas and stuff like that. Because Univision was making more money, and Televisa, hey, let's reconsider this deal again. So, what's that?
To answer your question, Ron, I think it is. To answer your question, the numbers in the market for the English speaking in the U.S. is not strong enough. I mean, the potential is there. Like Eugene, there's a lot of positive things to look at, but I think the probabilities of the numbers being there sufficiently for that to happen, I don't see that currently or in the future.
So I mean that's going to be another hurdle that's going to have to happen, because once they think that once Telemundo or not Telemundo, or NBC, who's the actual owner of the Telemundo or Univision group, once they want to actually have English English telecasts and stuff like that. And we're not talking about, you know, a Facebook stream live. We're talking, you know, with Nico and them. We're actually talking about legit, you know, a network. You know, the numbers are going to change. And are they going to are they going to put their money where their mouth is? And, you know, and stuff like that. That's to me. That to me is going to be when I say, okay, the English language market is there.
Yeah.
When
take
they're playing.
Take an example. The numbers of viewers watching, say, the Mexican national team in Spanish versus the numbers of viewers watching MLS or even the U.S. national team in the very same country, which is the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
That's why many of us Mexicans say that the Mexican national team is the national team in the U.S. most popular team.
But you know what?
And so,
Chiquis, I'm add to that. I think ultimately, if you want the English coverage to grow, I think it's going to come with the growth of MLS. And I know there's a lot of Mexican Americans that they kind of hate it. I still don't understand why. They take that rivalry a bit too far. But I do think if this league grows and it becomes more popular, that's when it's going to, you know, it's going to be better for Liga MX. And Liga MX understand this, which is a big reason they've been trying to do more like, they want to do like a tournament with MLS.
Another one. Hopefully, this one, you know, succeeds because the Superliga didn't.
The Superliga did it.
They've been working with MLS
but they know, they understand that.
It's the Superliga Part 2 Electric Boogaloo, right?
I would watch
see if that works.
I would watch that.
Working with MLS for a few years now.
Yeah.
You know, even just gaining guidance as far as business operations and that sort of thing, which I think it's a good thing. I think, you know, Liga MX would do well to see where they fit in the market in the United States. I think MLS would do well to see where they fit in the market in Mexico. I'm sure that there is probably not a very big market, but some sort of market for MLS in Mexico. I think there's a very big market for Liga MX here in the United States. And I think it does them, I think they're doing themselves a service by at least exploring it and trying things out, trying things like, you know.
Well, here's the deal. Liga MX, until very recently, was easily the fourth most popular sports league in this country, in the U.S. And that was without them even trying anything. They had their contracts with Univision and with Telemundo, and they really didn't do anything outside of that. And the ratings that they would get, especially consistently, and then once they would get into the Liguilla and the finals, etc. I mean, it was blowing away even hockey for sure, and occasionally getting close even to NBA numbers, which and again that's without doing anything. That's just that is without trying. And I think that because of that, the Liga MX has essentially ignored the fact that there is a massive room for growth in this country for that league. I know that Univision for the past couple of years has put on English language versions of their game on Facebook Live, which is nice. ESPN News or ESPN, I guess in like 2013, 2014, because of the fact that they had the contract to cover the National League game. And the only reason they did that was so that they would get the U.S.-Mexico game at the Azteca. Same reason we saw that with FS1 did the same thing, getting the Mexico game so that they would have that game as well. But now you see Fox Deportes has Monterrey and they have Tijuana. So the Tijuana home games are now actually on Fox Sports 1. So to me, the market's there, and as long as the Liga MX puts forth the effort, and Ron, you say, well, there has to be a reason for them to do that. To me, that's kind of backwards. Well, why don't you create the market? Why don't you? I mean, if you did no effort, and you're getting the ratings you're getting, then put a little effort into it, and maybe things will start.
That's Spanish speaking, though. The no effort is Spanish speakers that are watching it. If they put effort in English speakers, I think the numbers are going to be significantly smaller.
I think they'll be smaller, but I don't think that you necessarily will ever equal the amount of Spanish speakers And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I don't think that should be seen as a deterrent. Even if you're drawing in only another million people who watch an English feed, that's a million people more that are watching your product. That's a million more people that are going to be interested in going to a game, interested in buying merchandise, interested in talking about a club. That's significant for me. And I think
it's a million more people that are looking at your advertising.
Exactly. And I think that you have the feed is the same. The feed is the same whether it's you have English commentators, Spanish language commentators, whatever. The feed's the same. The cost to hire a couple of good English language broadcasters, in the grand scheme of things, is probably negligible. I don't see any reason not to do it, and I think that Televisa, I think that they realize this, that whatever they're getting for their rights in the American market, yeah, of course they're always going to want more, but they're already getting their bread and butter from Mexico, and from from that, I think that everything else they get from the United States is extra on top of that, and I don't think that they would turn their nose up at an offer because they didn't think it was good enough. I feel like somebody here is going to pony up the money for English rights and for Spanish rights, and it's better than not having your product shown to 375 million people.
Hey,
Yes,
gentlemen, gentlemen, I gotta leave. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Ron.
Final thoughts, Ron.
Final thoughts. I don't know, man. After what, 15, 16, 17, 18 years writing and covering Liga MX in English, getting paid peanuts, having to fork out of my own pocket. I don't know, man. I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical.
You got a free dinner.
But at least I
got a free dinner every now.
I got free dinners every now and then, and I have a good collection of memorabilia, books, magazines, and stuff like that. Got a lot of leather-bound books, with stuff like that. But no, I don't know, man. I'm skeptical, but I'm hopeful, at the same time.
Well, Ron, I'm with you. I too have to head out. I want to thank you guys for having me on tonight. It's been a pleasure chatting with everyone. If I'm going to leave with anything, for me, I think the future of Liga MX in the United States and in English especially is very bright. I think that the market is there. I think you're seeing a country that is embracing soccer, and it's a lot easier to see a game at 7 o'clock on a Saturday night or 5 o'clock on a Saturday night, or go to Mexico than it is to wake up at 6 in the morning and try and watch something from England, or to try and fly to Manchester to watch a game. So I think there's a lot of arguments for why Liga MX is going to be even bigger and continue to grow here in the U.S.
Yeah, man. Thanks, Eugene, for coming on. Thanks for your input. It's good stuff, definitely.
My pleasure. Take care, guys.
Later.
I think to piggyback off what Ron said and Eugene, I understand why he's skeptical and why it is that he's kind of a little bit on the fence about all of this. But I think if you look at it, I think the time is now. I think people like Joel, people like Ron have kind of paved the way little by little, and we know that anything that's worthwhile, anything great, is going to take a time, is going to have its long process. And I think you're getting to that point in time where the English language coverage is starting to build, that maybe now is the right time to start trying to branch out, to start trying to reach people, because the league at this point is international. I mean, there are people who, for example, our pod alone, we have someone in Ireland who follows us and who follows the team. We know someone from Poland.
You got an Irish Americanista?
Huh?
You have an Irish Americanista?
Yes, we have an Irish Americanista. We have someone from Poland who has their own dedicated Twitter account to tweet about the team in Polish. I mean, there's all these kind of great different stories that are out there, and you can see that the English the English language isn't even just secluded to the United States itself, but there are people out there in the other side of the continent that are wanting this as well because they're interested in the league, because they want to follow this league. And I'm not just speaking for America's basis, but I'm pretty sure there's people that want to follow Monterrey, people want to follow Chivas, people that I know there's a guy that lives in Australia who is a huge Chivas fan, and he follows the team constantly. So there's people out there that will welcome it, and it's not just going to be us here in the United States. It's also going to be people all around the globe.
You know, and imagine how much bigger that audience would be for Liga MX if Liga MX had actually decided to package their league in a way to make it more accessible for folks to watch. You know, we have folks on that live in Spain on our show occasionally, and we ask them, for you to watch a Liga MX game, what do you have to do? And unfortunately, they work for places, but the answer is they have to watch a pirata, because they have there's no agreement with Eurosport or Canal Plus or anything to run the Liga MX games on in Europe at all. Another friend of the show, Tom Harrison and Numeritos, just happened to fall back afterward into watching a Morelia game, and he's been hooked ever since. But again, it was the same thing. He was just looking for streams, and he found. So again, to me, the biggest obstacle that Liga MX has in order for them to become a quote-unquote more global product, in order for them to increase that popularity and awareness, that I mean, we all, for years, not just on this podcast, but in stuff that we've written, I mean, we all pretty much agree that Liga MX is at least a top 10 league in the world. I don't think anybody denies it. It is a good league. It is a very strong league. It is a very rich league. It's easily the richest league in the Americas for now.
Yeah.
But again,
except Chivas.
They're in a bubble. They're in a vacuum. They've done so little to promote themselves outside of Mexico and to the Spanish-speaking audience in the United States. That to me, when and if MLS does surpass them in whatever way, the only ones that Liga MX is going to have to blame are themselves.
No, I agree.
The product is there. The product is there. We all know it. We see it every week. As Eugene pointed out, the games are on at a very accessible time for soccer fans. They're on in the late afternoon and the evenings on the weekend. And to me, why on earth does Liga MX look at the schedule and say, hey, America's playing Monterrey this weekend. Let's put that on, and what time period do we think is going to be the time period that generates the most viewers? Oh, it's going to be Saturday at night. Well, that game's going to be Saturday at night. I mean, to me, the fact that they don't do that and haven't done that is insane. It is absolutely insane. And for God's sakes, have Monday Night Football, please.
No, I agree, but I mean, at this point now we're putting all of that responsibility on the league, which we should. I agree. I think the league should be doing more, and I think the team should be pushing for more. I think it's just, if we're talking about the movement, I think it's good to see these three teams that have done it, and I'm more than sure that with the more with more time and more teams see and acknowledge what they're doing, because like I said, I spoke to the guy who kind of runs the English language account for Club America, and he told me, he's like, we know about you guys. We know about the work that you guys are doing. We know about the work that other people have been doing. We recognize that, the club recognizes that's why we built this account, so we can reach, branch out to all of those people. And I'm sure that America's not that only team. I'm pretty sure Chivas knows that they got a big fan base in English. And I know that there's got to be all these other teams out there too that kind of see this, and they're like, yeah, why not even hop up?
Well, for Chivas, their experiment failed, man, because that was their hope with Chivas TV, and it was a massive failure, which they're not, because when they first announced it, they say we're not going back to TV. It's all on streaming. That's where the future is. And they ended up losing a lot of money, and they thought they were gonna, thought it was gonna be opposite. They thought they were gonna get all this you know, all these subscriptions, and it just didn't happen. And next year, that's when their TV contracts expire, and they're already talking about renewing with TV. They're gonna still keep it, but it's way
Well,
different
see,
from their
to me,
original
Joel,
stance.
that to me underscores another gigantic obstacle that Liga MX has. Is that what on earth are the clubs doing negotiating their own TV contracts when
Yeah.
when they're the only inventory that they have an inventory of 16 games a year. I mean, I understand it if you're basketball or if you're baseball in this country where you have upwards of 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 games. 16 games a year, the league needs to aggregate that, and they need to divide it equally, proportionately, however you want to divvy up the pie. But for a team to earn promotion and then to have to negotiate their contract, and for the TV people, you're Lobo Swap. Why on earth are we going to have you on our? We're going to lose money putting you on ours. No, it should be the exact opposite. I mean, it should be a huge prize and a reward to come into the first division because you know that right off the bat you're going to get a 30, 40 million a year just in TV revenue alone because
Kind of like
you're
the
in the
Prime,
first
no?
division because your market is not only Mexico but a gigantic portion of the United States. I mean, the fact that they don't do that to me is insane. Absolutely insane.
Well, I think we can all agree that the league is the business wise, the league hasn't made the best decisions ever. I
No,
think
I mean it is an ongoing theme, and I think that's something that we're going to start seeing. Hopefully, we're going to start seeing that change with the gentleman who's now running the next with Yon de Luisa. A gentleman who I think is at the precipice of professionalizing more so. At least the federation. Hopefully the league will follow suit. So that they can start doing it. And
hopefully.
again, to me, I think the league misses a massive opportunity when they they look at the schedule and at the time where they have the absolute best game on, they have like Puebla, Pixelman, Puebla or whatever it is. It's just a terrible game at the time where people are most likely going to be watching the game. Do you think the NFL on Sunday Night Football is going to put a bunch of schlubs on? No, they want to make sure that they have the most attractive game when the most people are going to be watching. For Liga MX, do you think that doesn't happen in England or Spain or Germany? Of course, they want to put their best game on.
No, yeah. I agree in that sense that the league has a lot to do in that part, but I mean, it does kind of tie our hands in this situation in regards to trying to expanding the growth of this English language community. But I think we and when I say I speak about everyone that's involved in this is we're pushing it and we're drawing the attention, and I think we're drawing the right attention from the right people. I think it's going to take just a little bit more time before we can get that. We can branch off, and for example, I don't know who mentioned it, but have that own channel on Univision where everything's just kind of English language. Fox is doing their thing, with like you said, Monterrey and Cholos. Now, just little by little, I feel like, we're making the right noise. We're drawing the right attention from the right people, even if it isn't the league.
I think maybe I'm being a little impatient.
I think of that line in Jerry Maguire: "Help me, help you."
Yes, exactly.
Like I said, for years, we've had this community, this English language community that's been doing nothing but giving Liga MX free publicity for however long. Just this massive amount of free advertising that we give them and have been giving them, and it's getting bigger. But they have to help themselves in the situation, and to me, the biggest thing that they can do is to showcase themselves a lot better than the way that they're doing.
Well, it's also a risk, though. it's a risk. Creating a Twitter account isn't a risk because it's free and stuff. But like, say for example, why doesn't and Nico and them are on Facebook Live? Why don't they have their own show on Univision on the main channel, like a half hour, an hour show in English, talking about the news in English? Well, I know Fox FS1 is broadcasting. Mundo's failed. ESPN had games in English, then stopped. So it seems like it's sort of like a risky proposition to put money into an actual channel, an actual show, and it not work out. Because I don't know what the ratings are for the FS1 games as opposed to a Spanish Univision game. I imagine the Spanish broadcast dominates that as far as numbers. So I think
Well, I would disagree because I don't know how many people have Fox Deportes. So FS1 is available on more carriers.
No, Fox Deportes is on all the Spanish packages. So if there's any Spanish,
yeah, but not everybody
speakers,
has a Spanish package. So,
well, all the people that speak Spanish. Well, that's what I'm saying. I think they would still dominate because any soccer fan is going to have the Spanish package. Any Mexican soccer fan is going to have the Spanish package, and they're going to have the Deportes.
It's the reason you have the Spanish package.
Yeah, exactly, because you want to watch the soccer. So I think I'm being a little bit impatient. Yeah, but I think I might be a little impatient. I think it's going to take a little bit longer, but there's a lot of positives. The time is now, like you were saying, Ivan, for this to go forward, for teams to start putting out their English accounts. I think that and I might be overestimating the league and all these their investments, but I think they're looking for a return on investment before they put down money on certain like TV rights and all that stuff.
Oh yeah,
in English before they make that jump, and it might take a little longer than we want.
No, yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, at the end of the day, let's remember what this all is. It's a business. It's not a sport for them. It's a business, and like you said, they're gonna want a return on their investment. And I think Univision has kind of been the smartest one. It's kind of giving Nico and I forget the other gentleman's name. Giving them this kind of Facebook Live, testing the waters, seeing, okay, let's see how much we can get. And if the numbers keep stacking up, I could easily see them getting their own time slot on Univision Deportes.
Yeah, when that happens, then that's the real hope right there. That's some progress being made.
It is, and we'll get there. And like I said, I think we're at a great point in the movement, and I think it's important that everyone keeps doing what we've been doing, and you guys with your podcast, and everyone else with their articles, and everyone that's producing out this content, like you said, this free publicity for the league and for the teams. It's only going to benefit us more than it's going to benefit them in the long run, because we're going to get the ultimate here. We're going to get the ultimate reward, which is see the league that we love and enjoy watching being broadcasted and being talked about in the language that we talk the most.
Yeah, and another quick point, real quick, that I just thought of. I think acceptance of the English language and English coverage in Mexico is not fully there. And I speak specifically to an experience, or Wiesel and I were talking about an experience in Azteca and getting credentialed there. It's like a circus down there.
No, yeah, I can imagine.
And even Monterrey, like I spoke to the press officer in Monterrey, and pretty much got a zero response for a team that's not named Rayados.
It's Chiquis is very unprofessional. When I started, and I'm going back to 03, man, before Soccer United marketing, if you wanted to get accredited to go report on stuff here in the US, you pretty much had to know the people. And you had like CantinaMX, and you had like Soccer 2000, and it was way more difficult, man, than if you applied through SUM. So I do think that part's still lacking in Mexico, man. Even in Mexico, because
the professionalization is something that is sorely lacking. And like I said, I think that young Luis is going to start to change that. I mean, just the fact, just the fact that, did I call him John? I did call him John.
Yes, that's
John De Luisa. just the fact that he has someone who's in charge of communication for the first time ever in the federation. A federation that has made just incredibly childish, the world of time and time again. Finally have a communications officer that in theory is going to at least, it's not reduce, eliminate those and at least reduce. So there's hope there. Next week on the show, we're going to bring on a gentleman who it is his goal sport in Mexico. A gentleman by the name of Michel Richaud, who's going to join us. He was at one point the one of the principals in the front office of Zacatepec. He's no longer that. We'll laugh about that, which is bad for us because I really wanted to go to Zacatepec. So, what are you going to do? But yeah, so that is one of the topics I want to talk to him about. Is what can these clubs do to make themselves more professional? Because you guys are absolutely right. I mean, it is we've had that experience. I know, Chiquis, that you've had that experience. I mean, it is just I mean, to me, I don't think there's anything more.
Anything more what?
Than to watch interviews at the airport.
Yeah.
I just can't think of anything more bananero than to watch, a team like Club America give interviews at the airport, and knowing that the reporters are waiting for them to give interviews the minute they come out of the gate. Because again, if you want to do that, that's fine. And set up an area where you do that. But to just hound these guys and sneak up on them and do it like that, to me is just it is unfathomable to me that a league as powerful and as rich as Liga MX still has things like this engine. It's amazing.
Well, guys, we've gone 2 hours. Do you guys want to wind it down with the final thoughts?
Fine. My final. I'm gonna go first, chicos. If you don't mind. I feel for English content in Liga MX to grow. We need MLS to grow, and I know a lot of my, fellow Mexi fans, they don't agree with that. They seem to hate. They seem to loathe, MLS at any cost.
They don't loathe MLS, Joel. They're scared of it.
They're scared of it. Yeah, but you know what I mean. They say like, like Vela, your career. You just ended your career because you went to LAFC. Never mind. Never mind. He's having the time of his life. But I do feel that this league needs to grow, and if any league has the potential to ultimately challenge the Champions League, as far as like bringing in top talent, because who wouldn't want to live in the U.S., like players, that's one thing they look at, like where would I want to live, or where would I like to relocate my family? And you have like great cities here in the U.S. So I think that's where the U.S. beats Mexico ultimately, just quality of life overall. Because fortunately, if you see Mexico, you still have some bad stuff going on. But if this league becomes more popular and it grows, and it keeps attracting more players, I think that's gonna help Liga MX. And I think Liga MX understands that. That's why they've been reaching out to MLS and there's all these like plans to do like a joint cup, and then they want to renegotiate because we had Copa America Centenario, and they want to ultimately invite MLS teams to Libertadores, and there's even talk of a All-Star game between MLS and Liga MX All-Stars. So I think Liga MX knows this, they understand that.
Yeah, good point on MLS.
And, so I think for us a lot, is to not be so negative on the league, because I see that a lot with a lot of the they cover in social media, they're too negative. They're just straight. They'll hate on any
That's the
player
way.
coming here, and it's like, dude, you're getting a chance to see this guy on a weekly basis, or you're gonna choose to hate on him, or to
That's
say
the
that
way.
his career ended.
That's the way I am a little bit, but I must say LAFC is winning me over in that
It's
aspect. So,
slowly winning you over.
yeah, slowly. Their influence
To me,
is impressive.
I see these people that complain and make fun of MLS. Blah blah. To me, I see it as in the back of their mind, they know that one day MLS is going to be, if not on par with Liga MX, it's going to surpass Liga MX. So
Yeah.
their ridicule is more out of fear than anything else.
Final thoughts, John?
I agree with Joel. I think that Liga MX and MLS are joined at the hip. The more interaction they have between the leagues, the more players that Mexican players specifically that play to me that play in MLS, and then vice versa, to where it just doesn't matter that that LAFC has 4 Mexicans and Club America or whatever has 3 Americans. To me, then I think that really is where the future is going to be for both leagues, really, because outside of those two, I mean, they need each other because they have no competition otherwise. Maybe they'll could do some stuff at Conmebol, but if you're Seattle Sounders or if you're Vancouver Whitecaps, and you have a game in Buenos Aires, what is that, like a 16-hour flight?
Yeah.
I mean, that is a tough task. So I think that their destinies are intertwined, and like I mentioned earlier, MLS is catching up to Liga MX much faster than people may. I mean, as soon as MLS starts getting the quality of South American players that we've seen in Liga MX, then I think that gap is going to close very quickly, and then I think people will start taking MLS a lot than people do right now. But I do think that the future of both leagues are dependent on each other.
Good stuff. Final thoughts, Ivan?
My final thoughts are actually going to go to the listeners here, and kind of reassure them that that the awareness is there, and to keep doing what we're all doing. We're a community. In a sense, we're a family, and like I said, the time is now for this English language coverage to kind of take flight into a bigger stage. And I think the more and more that we kind of fight for what we know and what we believe in, the more that it's going to showcase, to everyone that's listened to this podcast, to our podcast, to any podcast, really, whoever's writing articles, to those who have written articles since, back in the day, to the people who are starting right now. Just keep on doing, keep on persevering, because it is, at the end of the day, just all of us working towards that goal. And, you got to keep going and keep going. And thank you, gentlemen, for having me on.
Yeah, thanks, Ivan. Yeah, I agree with everything you guys said, and there's a lot of positivity to look at. My final thought is sort of unrelated, but something that Joel said. I would say, like, the whole, the comforts of living in the U.S. compared to living in Mexico, where there might be some dangerous things or some violence going on. I think that's a little bit overblown. It does exist, but I think in the U.S. it's a lot. The news and everything we hear is a little bit overblown. I've talked to a lot of Mexicans that they're just living perfectly happy lives down there, and I would encourage, like, Mexican Americans or even Mexicans that come up here after they're established, think of going back, because I know a lot of Mexicans that encourage that. They look at people that come to the U.S. and get established, financially and economically. They expect, or they would like, for those Mexicans to return back and contribute to the country. So that would just be my quick little thought. But yeah, to close the show, I'd like to thank Eugene and Yvonne for coming on as our guests, and of course our fellow CantinaMX folks, John, Joel, and Ron, for making an appearance. So This is Alder Campa for the CantinaMX podcast, and we will see you guys.
Tomorrow.
What's that?
Tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Tomorrow. So tune in, and we'll talk.